Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'm going to be sharing ghost stories from Connecticut. Let's get into it. Story 1. Just recently, I was at J. Timothy's Tavern in Plainville, Connecticut with a friend. We were standing in the entry/exit way, waiting to be seated when she pointed to someone standing by the fireplace. I couldn't hear what she said, but I noticed a single solitary man standing alone, staring off into the distance. I was surprised no one else was looking at him because he stuck out like a sore thumb in his blue tailored jacket and blank expression. My friend left me briefly to talk with someone, and while she had her back turned, the man walked past me. It creeped me out the way he stared straight ahead and no one else was looking at him. He gave me a strange feeling, so strange that I wanted to reach out and touch him just to make sure he was real. Instead, I just watched him past me and into the next room. And I can't explain it, but I just didn't see him anymore. I thought maybe he had ducked down onto one of the bar stools, but nevertheless decided to mention it to my friend when she returned to me. "That man that you were pointing to was really creepy," I told her. "What man?" she questioned, confused. She said she had been pointing to one of the waitresses and hadn't even seen anyone by the fireplace. We decided to investigate by wandering into the first room, but as I studied the faces and jackets, he wasn't there. The only other room that he could have been in was closed off one, but on our investigation we discovered a set of stairs leading up to a private party room, overlooking the other one, including some of the hall we had just been in. I studied every face, every jacket, and he wasn't among them. We continued searching every other room, although there's no way he could have gotten to them without crossing our path again, and he just wasn't there anywhere. Before I move on to the next story, I would like to point out that a majority of my viewers aren't subscribed. If you can just take a moment and hit that subscribe button, maybe click like or leave a comment, it'll go a long way in helping me fight the algorithm. You can always take it back later, and it's totally free. Now, back to the stories. Story 2. When I was younger, my cousin Felix was killed serving in Iraq. Even since then, strange things have happened at my mother's house. The first event started one night at a get-together. All of Felix's friends, my aunt and my sister, were sharing stories of him when he was little. A beer can that was sitting in the middle of the counter next to them, with no warning, flew off it. Not rolled, but flew in the air. Everyone started laughing at that point. Another time, my oldest sister and her boyfriend were lounging in my aunt and uncle's pool when my sister went in to use the bathroom. She came out of the bathroom and into the hallway, and that's when she heard distant voices, a male and female. It sounded like they were coming from my cousin's old room. She peeked in there, but there was no one and no TV. She investigated every room in the house and there was no radios, TVs, or anything on. But she still heard the voices coming from right outside the window of Felix's old bedroom. When they suddenly stopped, she went back outside and questioned her boyfriend. He said he hadn't been talking at all, just swimming. This even happened a couple of times. My cousin's old cell phone was kept in his car. My aunt and uncle never used it, but just keep it in the holster. One time, my aunt and uncle came home from the restaurant to discover 3 messages on their answering machine. The first one was from a friend. The second one was a garbled male voice, people in the background. The third one was near silence, except for a small male voice that could barely be heard. They checked the caller ID and were shocked to find that the calls were from Felix's phone. They rushed out to the garage and checked the car, but the phone was still in its place and still turned off. Story 3. I don't know if I'm dreaming or if I'm having a paranormal experience. 2 nights ago, I was asleep when I was awakened by someone standing alongside my bed and applying pressure to my face. It didn't hurt. It was just a very strange sensation. I sat up immediately thinking it was one of my children or my husband trying to wake me up to tell me something. No one was standing in the room. My husband was fast asleep next to me. I was shaken but not really frightened. I went back to bed with the covers over my head. I told my family what happened the next day. We all got a good laugh. However, my youngest son, who is 6, felt scared and decided he wanted to sleep with me last night. It was in the middle of the night when I was awakened by someone or something pressing against my stomach. At first I thought it was my son just snuggling up against me. Unfortunately, he was fast asleep. I tried to call out to my husband, but I didn't want to wake my son, so I stopped. I firmly said out loud, "Whoever is here, go away and let me sleep." I immediately flipped the blankets over the top of my head and didn't let any limbs hang out. I was scared last night. It was a weird sensation. I wasn't frightened because it didn't seem evil. However, I was scared because I don't know what to make of it or the situation. Story 4. I feel I should give you the background on my home first. The house is about 117 years old, and I've lived in it my entire life. I would say the haunting started when I was about 3 years old. My mother told me that I had an irrational fear of being alone upstairs, and sometimes even being upstairs at all. When I was about 5, I remember things started to go missing and then turn up again in peculiar places. One incident, my mother had a jar of money that had vanished, and a day later I found it in my dollhouse. I had no idea how it got there. Along with things being misplaced, we heard disembodied voices. People whispering, and my mother on several occasions came to my comfort because she heard a little child crying and assumed it was me, when in fact it was not. When I finally got my own room, I was moved into what I now call the nightmare room. I called it this because as the night went on and I stayed in this room, I started to develop a severe case of night terrors. Every night I would wake up screaming from graphic, gory dreams. I never watched horror movies as a child, so when I described the dreams in such detail to my mother, she was shocked. Eventually, I was moved from the room, and slowly the night terrors stopped, but I kid you not, to this day, I sleep with a blanket over my head. I think the absolute scariest thing, though, was when I was about 8. There had not been much activity in a while. I was sound asleep when I felt the sensation of almost like someone gently tapping on my calf to get my attention. Well, it was enough to get my attention. I opened my eyes and I saw a full-body apparition of a young man by the end of my bed. I was so shocked I just screamed at the top of my lungs, and just like that, it was gone, never to be seen again. As I got older and activity slowed down, and now at the age of 20 they are almost never active. I don't know if they're just dormant or maybe they show themselves only to children. I guess I will never know. On a side note, in high school, one of my teachers happened to live in my house when she was young, just for a short time. She confirmed that she too heard things in the house and had small things go missing. Other than that tidbit, I know nothing about the history of my home, although I would love to someday find out more. Story 5. It was about 1:30 a.m. on a Saturday. I had a bunch of my friends over for a sleepover. We stayed up all night long and we were camping out in my backyard. I said, "Hey guys, I have to use the bathroom. I'll be right back." I walked into my house and went up to the second floor. Then I heard footsteps walking up the stairs. I thought it was one of my friends trying to pull a prank on me, so I ran into my room and put on a mask. I could still hear the footsteps. I went to the top of the stairs and jumped and screamed to scare my friends. Nobody was there. I heard the footsteps again, but this time they were coming from the stairs. Then it hit me. It was probably my parents. So I went upstairs to see what they were doing. When I got up there, again, nobody was there. So I went into my parents' room, but they were sleeping. I ran out onto my balcony to see if my friends were still in the backyard. They were all still there. I didn't know what to do. Then I thought that maybe it was a robber. So I ran into my parents' room and woke them up. My mom ran into her closet and got her gun. My dad checked all the doors and said that they were all locked. They said that they were just tired and I was hearing things. I said that they were probably right. So I went back into my yard and we partied. At about 5 a.m., I got out my tent to stretch, and everybody else was sleeping. I went out and sat in a chair. I looked up at my house and saw a dark figure looking at me through one of the windows. I stood up to get a closer look, but when I stood up, it vanished. I told my friends, but they didn't believe me. The next time I had a party, the same thing happened, but this time my parents saw it. They called over a psychic. She said that it was the spirit of an owner in the 1700s. She said that he fell off one of the balconies at my house during one of his parties. She also said that he was angry because we were having parties in his house. A few years later, when I was about 15, the same thing happened, but this time it was bad. My friend went to use the bathroom. I was having a high school party. When he entered the bathroom, the door shut behind him and locked. By the time we opened the door, he had a scratch on his face and said someone or something attacked him. We quickly moved from the house after that. We had a church right next to my house. The church service bought the house and used it for the priest. The priest did an exorcism and there was no more reports of a ghost. But the thought of that ghost I will never forget. Story 6. One of the stranger experiences I've had puzzles me to this day. Whether or not this was even supernatural or just a very odd coincidence, I will never know. It started off when I was a little girl, about 8 or 9. There was a path in the woods in my neighborhood I used to go walking on every so often. I used to go walking there if I was scared of being home alone in my house. One day when I was walking, I had gotten pretty far into the path when from up ahead trotted what looked like a white German shepherd, although the exact breed is not clear. It had no collar and no markings of any color, and his fur was sort of dull, but not dirty, nor did the dog look homeless, despite its lack of a collar. When the dog got closer, I put my hand out to pet it, but it just walked by me, as if it didn't even see me at all. It never looked up at me. It just stared ahead and kept going and seemed to disappear quickly into the distance. I thought it was possible that their owner was further up on the path, but when I reached the end, I saw no sign of any person. Not to mention I don't recall a dog belonging to any of my neighbors. I brushed the incident off and never told anyone about it. Well, that was until about 2005, when I don't know for the life of me what reminded me of the incident, but I remembered it quite vividly, so I decided to tell my boyfriend about it. He didn't really think much of it until the next day. We had been driving for several hours, and my boyfriend stopped the car on the side of a dirt road going through a woods-like area, no houses for miles, so that he could take a pee. I got out and stretched my legs. I looked up ahead, and trotting down the road I see a white German shepherd looking dog, no collar, no markings, the same as the last time. It seemed to not even see me. I called to my boyfriend, "Do you see that dog?" "Yes," he said. "It's the same as in the story I just told you about." He walked in front of the dog and it just walked around him, not looking up. He extended his hand to pet the dog and it just moved away faster and disappeared down the road. What just happened? I had not uttered a word about the white dog for nearly 10 years, and after the day I finally do, I see it again, and this time someone else saw it. Now, as I said before, I don't know if it was supernatural or coincidence. Whatever it was, I will never forget the strange white dog. Story 7. I don't know where to begin with this story. It all started after me and my roommate stopped being friends, and I bought my first house. It was built in 1954 and was abandoned from 1979 until about 1991. I fell in love with the house the moment I saw it. It was small and had such a lovely retro feel to it. I suppose the first thing that I noticed was odd within the first few days was the complete lack of animal life in the yard. I never saw nor heard a single bird or squirrel. It had an eerie silence to the place. In my first week of living there, I remember that a can of soup had mysteriously made its way from the kitchen cabinet to behind my pillow. I hadn't had any guests in the house, and I could see no reason for me having put it there. After that, about a week later, I was sound asleep at around 2:30 a.m. My doorbell rang 4 times, very loud, distinct rings. I got up and went to the front door, but no one was there. Still half asleep, I cursed the kids next door, thinking they were playing tricks on me. However, before I went back, I glanced at the doorbell. To my surprise, the button was completely missing and the whole mechanism looked broken. I tried to ring the doorbell, but with no luck. This sent a wave of fear up my spine. and I slept with the light on for 2 nights after. After living in the house for several months with a few weird happenings here and there, I decided to invite over a lifelong friend of mine. I'll call him Gary. Gary has never expressed any interest in the paranormal. We have known each other since we were about 10. It was just something that interested him. Before going to my new home, Gary and I had gone out to lunch. His personality was normal as well as his color. I noticed almost right away his attitude changed after we were in the house, as well as his color began to look pale. He started getting easily aggravated about little things and started swearing frequently. He was like a whole different person. At about 8:30, Gary just stood up and walked into the guest bedroom and went to sleep. He didn't even say anything, he just left. I shrugged it off and went to bed myself shortly after. At about 1:10 a.m., I woke up to the noise of Gary power puking in the bathroom. I got out of bed and went to assist him in the bathroom. When I walked in, he was completely nude and curled up into a ball, rambling, this place is not right," or something to that effect. I decided to call 911, thinking he was on LSD or something along those lines. The next morning, I visited him in the hospital. I asked him what had happened to him. He told me the doctors found no cause of the extreme vomiting or delusions. In fact, the EMTs told him he started coming to reality shortly after arriving to the hospital. Gary also told me from the moment he entered the house, he began to feel very strange and that he kept getting grotesque and disturbing thoughts and images in his head, and felt very heavy presences lurking over him. Needless to say, he refused to return to the house. This incident deeply disturbed me. I lived in the house for 6 more months, living with unexplained noises and things being moved to weird places before I finally got fed up with whatever it was in the house. I sold the house and moved out within a month. To this day, when I drive by the home, I get a sinking feeling in my gut and I just want to run for my life. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Hope you enjoyed.